we're going to use a simple line art technique to achieve a more realistic look to your flower. To create a depth in your drawing, you really need to get the shadows right. So first, look at your reference photo. Don't rush it, observe the lighting, and understand how it hits your flower, where the shadows are created, the movements of the petals. So just take a hot minute to observe and understand what's going on in your picture. When I was starting drawing from reference specifically, I would take a really quick look to my reference and just start drawing right away. And I took a class with a really good teacher one time, and he would stare at his picture or his model for like 10 minutes before he would start drawing. It was really amazing to see how like he would connect to the subject before starting to draw, and that really changed my ability to portray my designs on paper after I started doing that. So I really suggest you take a good look at your picture. Just stare at it, don't rush it, and when you feel like you understood it better, you understood the movements, what's going on in there, you can start adding some shadows. Tune into your flower and try to ask yourself, how do I feel by looking at this picture? How is this flower feeling? Is she happy? Is she sad? Does she need water right now? Or is she asking for more light? Or maybe she is trying to give a feeling of peace? Or just try to understand what's the main feeling, what's the main message of your subject. And that is useful for anything that you draw from reference. You could be drawing a face, you could be drawing animals. You always should connect with your subject first. Now, I personally usually start from the parts that I'm more sure about. I noticed that in my flowers, since they have this round shape, the inside of the petals always start darker in the bottom and get lighter once they're closer to the top. So by creating some lines with this rapid movement like this, I will create the first shadows. Remember that if you want to use the same style I'm using, your lines should follow the direction in which the petals grow. So in this case, is from center out, and in my case specifically, also from bottom up, because it's a round type of flower. I know the direction by knowing where the center of my flower is, and of course by looking at my reference photo. You should always move from shadow to light like this. And I know this style of drawing is much more detailed and will take more time, so after you're done watching this class, I suggest you put on some good music and a good podcast and just enjoy the piece of drawing. Honestly, I feel like this is some kind of meditation for me. I get to be really focused on something, and that usually clears my mind from everything else, which feels really good. Of course, I'm speeding up the process here to show you guys what I feel is most important. But this whole piece took me about 7 hours to finish from beginning to end. So just take your time and enjoy the process. And remember, I'm drawing 3 flowers with lots of leaves. So if you're drawing just 1 flower, it might take a lot less time. And I promise you, the results are so rewarding. I noticed that when I look at a drawing that I'm proud of in the end, that I'm like, whoa, I did that. That really feeds my soul, and that really empowers me. It builds my confidence, it builds my self-esteem. It really nurtures me and makes me feel like I can accomplish anything I want in life. So I hope I can offer you this opportunity to feel really proud of yourself by the end of this drawing. Now let me tell you a little bit about contrast. The lighting, just like in photography or in movies, will bring the focus to where you want your viewer to focus on. So when you're creating a piece of art, you're actually trying to tell a story, right? Our goal as artists is to tell stories through our art. So through these stories, we want to make people feel things and relate to it, and maybe feel like they're less alone, or whatever message you're trying to put across. And one very, very powerful way to tell a story that people are using for centuries is by using light to tell your viewer what's important for them to see in your art. So when you shed a light on your subject, you tell your viewer, focus here, pay attention to this part, right? This is where you should look first. And from there, they can create a whole story in their heads. Now, of course, here we're drawing from a reference. So this is a study, guys. We're not telling a big story here right now. We're studying the shadows and we're learning how to use this style. So from here on, you can really add this technique to your creations. And I really promise you that if you practice this type of drawing from reference, you will have so much more control and power to tell your stories with your art. Another tip I have for you is to control your lines so you don't add too much shadow. We have a tendency to add more than less in general. I don't know why. It's actually a psychology thing I learned a while ago, and it makes a lot of sense with drawing. So we tend to add more lines than we usually need. We tend to add more shadows than we usually need. And with practice, you'll be able to control the amount of ink you add on paper better and better. So sometimes you don't need as many lines, or maybe you need shorter lines. So don't be sad if your flower ends up darker than you wanted. Just make sure you are leaving space for the light to be in your drawing. I know that when you get the hang of shading, it's so tempting to keep adding shadows because they look so beautiful. But remember that light is what creates contrast. If you add too much shadow or not enough shadow, your drawing will look flat. This is amazing if you're trying to achieve a flat look. Flat art is very beautiful. I love it. But here we're trying to experiment with something different. We're trying to create something with a lot of depth, a lot of contrast, and trying to get as close as possible to realism, which means we want to avoid the flat look here. I want you to be able to draw something with depth so that next time you're creating an art piece from your imagination, you are free to choose what style you want to use. The reference photos help a lot in our study, and you will see how much better you'll be drawing after you practice drawing from reference. Now notice that every petal that is behind another petal has a shadow. And the more shadows you add to your drawing, the more dramatic the results will be. You can add less ink by doing shorter lines if you want a lighter, more delicate result, but I personally like this drama. I think the dark shadows create some mystery, and I really strive for that when I'm drawing because that's kind of like my style now. But maybe you will like to add less shadows than me, which is also amazing. To make my shadows look very deep and dramatic, all I do is add some extra black ink in the parts that I want to be the darkest. So I usually contour the petals where there is a lot of shadow to make them even darker. In the end, the important thing is that your general drawing follows a realistic shadow pattern. So if you have two flowers and one of the flower has the shadows on the left and the other flower has the shadows on the right, it's just gonna look weird. It's just not gonna look balanced, it's not gonna look harmonic, and it's gonna be weird and people might not relate to it. So you can have an amazing technique, but if you don't understand your shadows, where to put them, how to portray it, you won't be able to draw realistically. In my reference photo, I noticed that the center of the flower is the darkest part, so I'm making sure that I'm making it darker than the rest of the flower. So the petals in the center of each flower are a bit darker, and the inside of it I can barely see in the photo, so I'm going to be really generous with my ink and add as much darkness as possible. I really like this dramatic center of this flower that I can barely see.